Time now to take a closer look at the day's business news. The violence in Chile was sparked by a now suspended hike into metro fares, but the protests have widened to reflect public discontent and larger economic issues. Yuka Roye joining us in the studio to explain. Yuka.
Well, Chile, has often been hailed as one of Latin America's most stable economies, but people have been frustrated with the rising cost of living and widening inequality and the government's liberal economic policies. President Sebastián Piñera says sudden increases in exchange rates and oil prices were behind the now shelved plan to hike metro fares. Nick Rushworth takes a look at the country's economic policy.
A state of emergency, clashes and curfews in parts of the country. The unrest was sparked by a now suspended increase in metro ticket prices.
I have sent a bill to Congress that will allow us to suspend the metro fare increase until we find a formula that allows us to protect citizen rights better against sudden or unexpected increases in the exchange rate or in oil prices, which are behind this price hike.
Aside attacks on public transport infrastructure, businesses have been ransacked and supermarkets looted, amid anger over the cost of living generally, rising social inequality and the government's liberal economic policies. The country has the highest per capita income of South America. Economic growth is forecast this year to be at 2.5%. Inflation is at just 2%. But there is a strong undercurrent of frustration with economic policies that have virtually privatized all healthcare and education. The value of pensions is falling, and the costs of basic services are rising. One of the problems for the government is that prices for Chile's main export, copper, have fallen by more than 20% since last year. Often hailed in the past for its sound economic management and stability, the reputation of Chile's economic model is taking a hit.
Now, from the Chilean economy to the Japanese economy, Tokyo released its September trade figures, which showed both exports and imports shrinking amid weak demands. Trade deficit totaled $1.1 billion, a third consecutive month of red ink. Exports fell 5.2% from the same month last year, while imports dropped 1.5% on year. Exports to South Korea dropped almost 16% on the year, this after a diplomatic spat led to a decision by the Japanese government to curb exports of some key semiconductor materials to its neighbour. Meanwhile, South Korea has also been hit by weaker global demand. Its exports plunged 19.5% just in the first 3 weeks of October from a year earlier. The new figure is worse than an 11.7% drop in exports for the whole month of September. Semiconductor exports, which account for about 1/5 of South Korea's total shipments abroad, dropped 28.8% in value over the first 20 days of October on year as prices dropped sharply. Now, with all that, let's take a look at the markets. Asian stocks were mixed at the start of the trading week amid uncertainty over Brexit and the US-China trade battle. Let's have a look at the figures. Tokyo, Nikkei, well, they since came back up, actually, with Hong Kong's Hang Seng floating just above the flat line and Shanghai Composite as well, coming back up over into positive territory. In Europe, London's FTSE and Paris's CAC 40 started trading in negative territory, while Frankfurt was in the green at the open. The British pound slipped against the dollar and the euro, but it hasn't taken a nosedive, suggesting that underlying confidence among investors that a disorderly Brexit can still be avoided. As you can see, down about 0.5 percentage point against the dollar and about 0.33% against the euro. Meanwhile, US plane maker Boeing says it regrets concerns raised by internal communications over the 737 MAX plane's safety. The documents were recently handed over to US lawmakers and federal regulators. In the messages, a former test pilot told a co-worker back in 2016, when the model was being certified, that he had run into trouble during a simulator test flight with the plane's automated flight control system called MCAS. He said that he had unknowingly lied to the regulators. The MCAS has been linked to 2 deadly crashes that killed 346 people last year.
The business news there with Yuka Roye. Thank you very much, Yuka.